the large companies like Infosys, TCS, Wipro, and so on and so forth, their entry level salary is around 3.5 to 4 lakh rupees. Okay. Now, apart from various paths, there are types of companies. I think this is one of the big questions that people have: what kind of companies I should work for? Again, there are two broad categories: large corporates, and then there are small companies or startups, right? Both have their pluses and minuses. If you are working for a large corporate, it's pretty steady and secure. The job is pretty secure, and the facilities are good. You know, you get uh, decent enough salary, not necessarily a great salary, but there will be salary will be decent definitely, and the facilities will be good, and there will be perks, right? So there will be a good dining hall, and then there will be canteen, dining hall, bus service, swimming pools, nice swanky buildings and things like that, right? um, at the same point of time, I think when you work for a large corporate, and nothing against it, I mean, I started my career with Infosys, which is a huge company at this point of time. The learning opportunities will be limited, right? So you will get to learn. I mean, so it will be very structured learning. There's no doubt about that, right? You know, for example, Infosys has this huge training center in Mysore, and you get to spend 3-4 months there, where they put you through a lot of rigor and things like that. But overall, the learning opportunities will be limited, because you work in a very structured, limited environment, right? And the exposure is also limited, because you will work in one part of the organization and you will interact with only some people. Um, on the contrary, if you are adventurous and if you want to learn a lot, then you should go and work with a small company or a startup, because the learning opportunities will be much higher. You will get to interact with senior people, and many of these senior people will have a lot of experience in the industry, would have worked in large companies and things like that. So you get to learn all those things. The exposure is huge, right? And you also get to work on latest technologies. Typically, bigger companies will be a little slower. They will be a little behind the curve, whereas the smaller companies and startups would work on latest of the technologies. On the flip side, they may not be paymasters. They may not pay very well to start with. If you're working for a funded startup, you might actually get a very good salary. That's the flip side. So it's very much possible that you get a lot of learning capability, learning opportunities, latest technologies to work on, and get good salary also. But many a times these brands will not be known, right? And that creates problems sometimes, especially in marriage market. For example, if someone says, "Oh, I work for TCS," versus someone says, "I work for ThinkingGud," there's a or iLink, there's a difference, right? In the marriage market. But I mean, that's a reality. There is peer pressure, there is social pressure, and so on and so forth. But it depends. What I mean, you should look at what you need, what you want, right? So this is broadly how the two type of companies operate.
One question is there, Uday, if you can
Sure.
see in chat box.
Mhm.
Are you able to see?
Let
Otherwise, I
me.
will read.
Yeah, if you can read, that will be good.
How can you please explain the difference between service and product based companies?
Yeah. Okay. So I have not covered that here. So again, see, so typically, if you see how the Indian IT industry has grown over a period, it has been on the back of services. So if you look at all the big companies like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, Accenture, Cognizant, all these people do mainly services. It's not that they don't do any products. But maybe that is, product will be maybe 5% to 10% of their revenue, or maybe less. So and then there are other companies, and especially the newer companies, which are more on the product side, right? So there are some companies which have come from overseas. So for example, Microsoft has a setup here. Amazon has a setup here. So pretty much everyone has a setup here. Plus there are some companies which are like which have grown internally. So there could be a Swiggy, Paytm, uh, uh, you know. Uh, um, Flipkart and things like that, right? So these are so basically the key difference between a product company and a services company is that services organizations do work for others, right? And whereas product companies do work for themselves mainly, right? That this may not be the basic difference, but mainly this is the key difference. Again, if you have to choose between a services, or if you have to ask me, right, my personal opinion is that the amount of learning that you get in a product companies is much higher. um, so for example, if you get to work in Flipkart or an Amazon, the amount of learning could be much higher, because typically these companies are in the leading edge of bleeding edge of the technology. And they are coming out with products which are like actually going out in the real world. So the learning opportunities are good, and at the same point of time, the pace, the pay scales are also very, very good. um, Again, in services organizations, many a time the work which is being done might be on the back end side, right? So it could be the supporting services which they might be working on, not always, but many a times, right? So the chances that you will get exciting piece of work is higher in a product company. Having said that, when you work for a product company, you just work for one company. When you work for services organization, you might work on different projects for different companies. So that way, there might be a better learning, right? You might get exposed to multiple different environments. You might get exposed to multiple different countries, multiple different customers, and so on and so forth. So a different kind of learning is there, right? But if you look at the tech learning, it might be more in a product company. Okay, so now I have talked about a little bit more, and I will very quickly go through this. So when you look at so there are different paths of progression, right? So I talked about different options. Now within those options there are multiple smaller options. So for example, if you look at core development and engineering, you start as a developer, but then again you can take multiple paths. Again, I have explained only few paths here, right? So one is the delivery oriented path, where you started as a developer, then you become a team lead, then project manager, delivery manager, and so on and so forth. And second path could be the technology path, right, where you start as a developer or engineer, but you become a technical expert, then become a tech lead or tech PM, and then you become an architect and things like that, right? Now the difference between the two paths is actually vast, pretty vast, right? The kind of attitude which is required or kind of skill set required is very, very different, right? On the When it comes to the delivery management paths, while both these paths start with the basic developer engineer path, starting role, they diverge, right? One is more about managing people, managing projects, managing customer, and so on and so forth. The other, which is the tech path, is more about it's more in touch with technology. You work with less number of people. So if you want to work with a lot of people, you want a lot of power and things like that, maybe delivery management is better for you. If you love technology, if you really don't like managing people and things like that, and but if you want to go deeper inside the technology, the tech path is for you.
One
Within
question
development,
is there.
yeah, sure.
What should be essentially kept in mind before starting your own tech related startup?
Okay, so that is whole different topic, right?
Okay,
I
okay,
I
then
spend a lot of time with a lot of people who are trying to do their own startups and things like that. I will try to address that question towards the end if there is time. But that's a whole different topic. I mean, there could be a 1 hour session for that itself, right? But I will try to address that. Let me finish this because it's already 6:42. Let me finish this piece and then I will try to
oh,
answer that question. Uh, So there are options, within when you uh, go into the development piece, there are again multiple options, right? In terms of different technologies that you can work on. So there are traditional technologies like .NET, Java. It can include things like Node, Angular, and so on and so forth, which is like I would call them pretty traditional. This is the regular stuff that most of the people do. Um, Last few years, there is another stream which has evolved, which is like mobile technologies, which has things like iOS, Android, or it could have hybrid development like Xamarin or Cordova and things like that. Cloud is another thing which has emerged, right? So there is cloud related programming which is there, right? On things like Azure or AWS, or it could be Google Cloud, and so on and so forth. Um, Now the the biggest trend that I can think of at this point of time is around data and AI. Right? What they say is data is the new oil. Right? Everybody is looking at data and what to do with that data. Come up with meaningful inferences from the unlimited amount of data which is being generated today. Right? The data being generated is structured data, which mainly happens in organizations, and there's a lot of unstructured data which is getting generated, like in Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth. Right? And how you mine this data to do something has become the most important thing, right? So data and AI. So when I look at my own company, um, bulk of the growth that we are seeing is in data and AI space. And I can also tell you that data and AI jobs are very, very well paying jobs, right? So we have rule of thumb, which is salaries, right? So typically if you look at uh, you know uh, regular jobs, you can expect a salary of 2x of your experience, right? So if you have 10 years of experience, you can expect 20 lakh rupees. If you have 15 years,